everyone, my name's Katie.
And my name's Vic.
And I can see you.
I can see you too.
And this is Shelf Indulgence.
So you're probably wondering what our new friend is doing here. This is our nice little plexiglass friend named Puck, who's going to allow us to actually see each other for once again.
Hello.
It's super nice to have him because now we get to be in frame together.
Which is nice.
Yes.
The other way was less than ideal, I would say.
It was interesting for sure.
So today what we're going to be talking about is kind of part 2 of a series that we've been doing, which is fandoms, and talking about kind of the concept of fandoms and how they started, what influence they've given to our culture and that sort of stuff. Today, however, we're going to be talking about the fans specifically and their interaction within the fandom.
Now, it's a large thing, fandom. There are so many people who are fans of things, who are parts of fandoms, who interact with each other online. But interestingly enough, there seem to be 2 main ways that they actually interact with the media that they are consuming. So there is the curatorial fandom, which is wanting to know things about something. And then there is the transformative fandom, which is building upon the thing that they are consuming. So the original media, they are turning into something new. So different ways that they can interact with the fandom within these 2 kind of different sects are fanfiction, headcanons, creating meta about a piece, cosplaying. So there are tons of different ways that they can interact, and most of them fit within one of the 2 ways, while some of them are kind of both transformative and curatorial.
Now, that is something important to keep in mind when we're talking about fans within the fandom, because there is a difference between being a fan and being a fan within a fandom.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I like Star Wars. I think it's cool, but I don't consider myself part of the Star Wars fandom. I don't really interact with the fandom at all. My biggest interaction is consuming the movies.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with, I would say, let's say My Hero Academia, I would consider myself in the My Hero Academia fandom because I interact with other fans, we talk about theories, that sort of thing. So just keep that in mind as we go ahead, that's the differentiation we're making, that you can be a fan when you're not in the fandom, but specifically we're discussing the fans who interact with the fandom itself.
So all of these things that we're going to talk about apply to people who are actually interacting with the fandom in some way. They are not just watching something or reading something and then liking it and moving on. They are taking that experience and turning it into something else, whether they are being just wanting to know more about it or wanting to transform it in some way.
So let's talk about that first type of fan then, that transformative fan. That's probably the one a lot of more people are familiar with than the other one. So these are the fans that are writing fan fiction that is outside of canon or within the same universe as a subject that they're consuming. They're creating headcans for characters that to them would make sense, but it's not necessarily confirmed within canon.
Or they're doing fan art. They're drawing the characters however they may be. Like, it's not going to be, whatever the final product of that fan art is, it's not directly the original source materials. They are transforming it in some way.
Right, it's a reinterpretation of the media that they're consuming.
Yes, whether it's just into that person's own art style or them putting the character into a new setting entirely.
Right. Alternate universes are really popular within this type of work. So some of the fandoms, like we said, a lot of the fandoms we'll discuss can be interpreted as both in different circumstances. But these ones that we're going to talk about mainly fall into the category of transformative, or the fans mainly fall into that category.
Yes.
So you have things like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where it's very popular to say what bender you are and kind of make your OC, your original character, for that fandom and have them be a bender within the universe. I already mentioned My Hero Academia. Having a superhero persona, I think, has been like a thing for a very long time, but it seems to be a big thing in the My Hero Academia fandom to have original characters that are
a part of the story.
Part of the story,
yeah, they're
right?
Transforming it in some way, like they've added something new and that changes the entire story somehow.
And it's not just media, as in videos and books, although that usually is the majority of them. Now we're seeing more fandoms and fans arrive in podcasts as well. So, for instance, the Adventure Zone, which is a D&D podcast put on by the McElroy brothers. There are a lot of people out there, because the narrative leaves so many open ends for the characters, that there's works of fan art and fan fiction that interpret those empty points almost overwhelmingly.
Yes, and I think the fandoms that fall within transformative primarily fandoms are going to be the ones that have a world and have a certain story that's told, and that story is not nearly the entirety of that world. So My Hero Academia and Avatar and The Adventure Zone, all of those are telling a specific story, but they have such large world building where they have these other characters that you don't actually get to see much of, or you know that these people go on a lot of adventures after the fact, after the story that's being told, and it just kind of sets those stories going in your mind. And so there are a lot more fans who are going to go into that and actually try to tell those stories on their own.
Right, and it's not necessarily with just the main characters. Being in a transformative fandom allows you to look at those characters that maybe haven't been explored as much in the meta or in canon, and you yourself want to see those characters expanded upon.
Yes, and there are whole sects of certain fandoms that are just devoted to one side character that was only there for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, maybe even one episode or one chapter. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I know Supernatural is another big one where you see characters that are only there for a little while, that they interact with the other hunters, the angels, all of those people kind of in the background that you don't see as primary characters. They can have whole narratives online about who they are and what they're into that are completely separate from anything that you actually see on screen.
Absolutely. So that's the transformative type of fans, and they are, while they're the most familiar, I wouldn't say they're a majority, because the other side, the curatorial side, I feel like is more expansive in wanting to know more about the canon and about the meta.
Yes. So curatorial fans want to know as much as possible about the media that they're consuming. So they will seek out all the facts, they will seek out the backgrounds that maybe aren't in the original. So I think the biggest example of a curatorial fandom is going to be Star Wars.
Oh, absolutely.
There are so many books, there's games, there's movies, there's TV shows, and there are people who are devoted to knowing every single thing about every character in those, and they want to know facts, they want to know years that things happen, they want to know exact dates, they want to know names. Well,
and they explore things that aren't explored in the meta that are still considered canon, and that's what's important there, is because normally they're not, while they can transform the media itself, their main objective is to find out the facts of things that may not be represented in the mainstream media that we see. So, for example, there are series upon series dedicated to the lore of the Sith and how they developed and who's a part of it. So there are some characters that only appear in certain books that are considered canon or were considered canon that don't appear in the movies at all. And you really have to be one of those fans that wants to know more about the world within its canon to know that character.
Yes, there's a whole universe beyond just the movies to explore, and that's not the only fandom that is interested in that. I mean, you have Brandon Sanderson has his Cosmere world, in which he has multiple series that all take place in the same kind of multiverse, and there are whole Wikipedias dedicated to tracking everything that happens in that universe. So there are more fandoms out there that are like that are the fans just have all of this information that they kind of have to gather and put together and puzzle together, or even just know and share with each other.
Well, that's similar to, outside of the stereotypical Star Wars, Star Trek, those are the ones we would think of for curatorial right off the top of our head. But even Warhammer, which is a very popular game that has such heavy lore in it that it has books upon books written about different aspects of that world. And I know fans of Warhammer go out to know that lore, and it helps them play the game better. That's the reasoning behind it for them, is they can play the game better because they understand the lore behind it, and so the motivations are, it's almost a study as if an actor would go and study the character that they are playing. So it's very interesting to observe a Warhammer person talking about the lore of the world, and if you're not a part of that fandom, you're just like, well, it's just a game that they're playing. But it's so involved, it's so riveting to hear someone who's really involved in that, to talk about all of the different realms and species, and almost as if it's a whole new history for another world.
And I feel like a lot of the ones where the fans fall into this curatorial kind of way of interacting with the fandom are huge. I mean, even if they're not very well known, Warhammer has just so much lore that you can look through. Star Wars has all of the media. The Brandon Sanderson, his Cosmere books, some of them are 1,000 or more pages long. So they have all of this that you have to kind of get to before you can start moving off on your own. So there are people in transformative fandoms that are curatorial, and in curatorial that are transformative, but I think the different kinds of media lend well to the different kinds of fandoms. So you see them going one way or the other more than the other.
And, you know, there are some media out there that kind of crosses both, whereas when you say a certain fandom, you might think of it as more transformative than curatorial. But, for instance, Homestuck is a pretty good split of both. It is such a vast story with so much lore in it, and a little complicated to understand if you're not completely in the know of what's going on. But at the same time, it lends itself to that transformative work. It lends itself heavily to being able to create original characters and original storylines and developing different side characters because there are so many characters in it. Yes. So when we're talking about these two, I don't want you to envision that it is cut and dry. You are either transformative or curatorial, because even the media that is consumed in the fandom can be considered as both, almost simultaneously.
Yeah, it's definitely possible to be curatorial and transformative as a fan. You can like gathering metas and talking about the thing itself, and you can like transforming it into your own thing. Both are possible, and it's definitely not you are a Star Wars fan, so you have to be curatorial, you have to know everything. It's never going to be like that, but you can see that there are instances where it's kind of an equal split of both. There are instances where it's one or the other. And there are also things that are inherently both transformative and curatorial. I think cosplay is a great example of this, because cosplay is creating your own thing from this media. Like, it is inherently transforming it because you are very unlikely to be the character that you're representing, so you have to transform yourself into that. But there are also so many cosplays that they're just specific. They have every single detail right. And then there are ones where it's like, this is a new interpretation of this character. This is steampunk Star Wars. Like, this is completely new. So it can be anything that you want it to be. I think that's a good representation of what fandom is whatever you want it to be. Well,
and another good both for the two of them is that both fans consume the content. It just depends on how you prefer to kind of consume that content. Whether you are looking at it for lore purposes, or if as you're watching it, you're creating your whole new world in your head based around what you're seeing. But if you're a fan, you're a fan. And that's relatable whether you're transformative or curatorial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And fans can, on either side, who you may be entirely transformative and your best friend may be entirely curatorial, but there's still so much in common between them because you both love the same media. So
what would you say you were, Vic? Are you curatorial or are you transformative?
Definitely transformative. Yes.
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty transformative too. Okay. That being said, sometimes I lend myself to the curatorial personality because some of the media that I consume as a writer, because that's what I am, I I need to make sure all of my points line up with canon if that's what I'm going for. And so sometimes I do have to be a little curatorial and go and look at the wiki and get more info than what the mainstream media was able to give me.
And I think what pushes me more towards curatorial is when there are things you have to figure out. So if there's an interconnected storyline that you have to know all this info to actually understand, I start to deep dive into the facts about that story, and that really, it's really fun to be a curatorial fan in that case, because you get rewarded for it.
Well, and I think both of us are pretty close with curatorial people.
Yes, definitely.
I know my partner personally is very curatorial because the story is so important to him that he just has to know more about it. He wants to know more of the world as the world is. So he's not interested in transforming it to his own design. He would rather create a completely new design of his own making and still consume canon for the things he's interested in.
Yes, and I have a roommate who is very into Star Wars, and I know all of these facts about Star Wars, and it's so interesting to hear, even though I'm a Star Wars fan, but I wouldn't consider myself in the fandom. So I just get to hear it secondhand in this excited manner, and it makes it way more fun than if I had consumed it
yourself. Right? Absolutely. It's always fun to see someone's eyes light up when they're talking about a subject that they're really into, whether or not they're transformative or curatorial within the fandom. Because if you're one and the other person is the other, it's a lot more interesting, because like you said, you're getting to consume it in a more interesting and engaging way than if you just went and looked at the wiki.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you've missed part 1 or any of our other videos, especially our cool LibraryCon video that we did at the beginning of November, they're all on our website at clermontlibrary.org, or you can check out our Facebook and YouTube at Clermont County Public Library.
And if you want to talk about what kind of fan you are, or talk about fandoms that you think fall into one of the other curatorial or transformative, please comment down below. We always want to talk to you. And this has been Shelf Indulgence. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.